Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels Origins deck tag. Today we're taking a look at the black-white Enchantments archetype, and starting at our 2-drops, since we don't have any 1-drops in this deck, is Knight of the White Orchid, a 2-mana 2/2 first striker, and when the knight enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than we do, we get to search our library for a plains card and put it into play untapped. So a nice little ramp card here that's especially very powerful if we're on the draw, since we can play this on the 3rd turn before playing our land drop for the turn. Our opponent most likely has 3 lands in play, so we play this guy, get a plains into play untapped, and can still play a land for a turn. So on the 3rd turn we'll have 4 lands in play to our opponent's 3 lands, so he can help us get to our expensive cards faster. And the 2/2 first striking body is also a nice target for our enchantment spells. Next up is Shambling Ghoul, a 2/3 that enters the battlefield tapped, so just another cheap creature to put our enchantments onto, and a 2/3 body is pretty good at blocking all those 2/2 creatures from the Renown deck, so we've got that going for us, at least if we're on the play, because he does enter the battlefield tapped. Next up is Reef Soul, the good 2-mana removal spell that's gonna see play in pretty much any black deck in this game, since it's so efficient at dealing with most 2 and 3 drops in the game. And it is sorcery speed, but for 2 mana we can't complain. And next up is our first enchantment in the deck. It gives the enchanted creature +1/+2 and flying. The flying is pretty relevant with all those Thopter tokens running around, and also makes our threats evasive, so they're hard to block. Next up are the 3-drops, where we start off with Blessed Spirits, a 2/2 that has flying, and whenever we cast an enchantment spell we can put a +1/+1 counter on Blessed Spirits. So if we were to put a Nimbus Wings on Blessed Spirits, we would have a 4/5 flyer, which is pretty scary and hard to deal with. And Blessed Spirits is not even the best target for Nimbus Wings, as we'll see in just a bit. And also important to note here that we don't have to actually target the Blessed Spirits to give him the +1/+1 counter. We can just as well target another creature with an aura spell, or just play an enchantment spell to get the +1/+1 counter on them. So if we want to diversify our threats, that's a good way to do it. Next up is Helius Pilgrim, a 1/2 for 3 mana, that when she enters the battlefield we get to search our library for an aura card, reveal it and put it into our hand. So very powerful effect here, as it not only gives us a form of card advantage since we get a body into play as well as still having a card in our hand, it also gives us some selection over what kind of aura we want to get. We could get one of our removal spell auras, or we could just get one that powers up our creatures. So a very versatile card, and having that body come into play to have a target for our enchantment spells is also very important. So Helius Pilgrim is certainly one of the more important cards in this deck. Next up is Blood-Cursed Knight, a 3-mana 3/2, and as long as we control an enchantment, the Blood-Cursed Knight gets +1/+1 and lifelink, so it becomes a 4/3 lifelinker for just 3 mana, which is a pretty big deal, and goes very well with cards like Nimbus Wings, as it will make it a 5/5 flyer with lifelink, so that's just about a Baneslayer Angel, and if you've played Duels 2015 you know that's a pretty good card. So Blood-Cursed Knight also works very well with our next card, which is Suppression Bonds. For 4 mana we get to enchant a non-land permanent, so can be a creature, can also be a planeswalker, and the enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities cannot be activated. So this is a removal spell we can put on the opponent's permanents to not let them attack or block or activate their abilities. So this is a permanent way to boost up our Blood-Cursed Knights. Next up is Blight Caster, another payoff card for playing all those enchantments, because if we do play one of those enchantments with Blight Caster in play, target creature will get a -2/-2 until end of turn, so acts as a removal spell for smaller creatures. Blight Caster also works very nicely with a Reef Soul, our 2-mana removal spell, since we can, for example, give a 5/5 from our opponent a -2/-2, and then it's in range of a Reef Soul, so we can permanently take care of it. Next up is a Knightly Valor at 5 mana, another enchantment aura spell, and when Knightly Valor enters the battlefield, we can put a 2/2 white knight creature token with a vigilance into play, and the enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has a vigilance. So this is a nice curve topper in our enchantment deck to put on pretty much any of our creatures to turn them into big threats for the opponent, and we get a 2/2 knight token for our troubles as well. So even if they do manage to destroy the enchanted creature, we still have another creature in play that we can enchant with future knightly valors or other enchantment spells. Next up is a Sigil of the Empty Throne. This is an enchantment, so not an aura spell we can fetch up with the Helius Pilgrim, but this is a very powerful enchantment because whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we can put a 4/4 angel creature token with flying into play. So this can be very hard to deal with for most decks, and if the game goes long and you're not under too much pressure, this will definitely win you the game. The final card in our deck is a Tragic Arrogance, which acts as sort of a sweeper effect. So for each player we get to choose a permanent of each type, so that includes creatures, artifacts, enchantments and planeswalkers. So we get to choose one of each, and the other permanents of that type get sacrificed. So the opponent gets to keep their worst creature, since we get to choose which one they keep. Same goes for the other permanent types. And we get to do the same, so we get to keep our best creature and our enchantment of choice, which could include a suppression bonds we control that's enchanting the opponent's creature, so we get to give them the creature that's enchanted by the suppression bonds, so this effectively gets rid of all the opponent's creatures, while we can keep our Bloodcursed Knight or Blessed Spirits to win us the game, or we could simply just give them a bad creature and then leave us with a creature that's enchanted by some aura spell that can also finish the game. A pretty tricky card, but can be very powerful, especially in this enchantment deck. And then finally our mana base: 4 Orzhov Guildgate, 2 Isolated Chapel, 7 Swamps and 11 Plains, to make sure we can cast those early Knights of the White Orchid. So that's gonna do it for this deck tech. I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.